Good afternoon. Welcome back to Apocalypse and Genesis. I'm convinced writing and religion left the Americas for the supposed Old World sometime before the cataclysm that began the age of Taurus, which was not the flood of Noah. 1,000 years before, half the planet had burned. Fortunately, some of my Celtic and Native American ancestors knew how to weave reeds into boats and how to carve them, and they had headed out prior to the apocalypse on long voyages in very different directions, knowing it was time. The verse here says a total reversal is in the cards again, just as when Jesus talked about doves and serpents. Columba of the extreme south will again replace Draco of the far north. Says the same thing on the bowl. Cassiopeia and Crux, ends of the Milky Way, trade sides. That's one meaning of your cross. Unfortunately, I'm colorblind and can't see exactly that thing to the left. Could be the shadow attached to one's soul, which now goes back to the underworld, or it might be Amet, if the Ojuelans knew who that is. A beast part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, who devours hearts, and now due to rise again. Tragic thing is, spell that beast's name in Hebrew and it means truth. So when Yahweh talks about his Hesed way emet, 2 Samuel 15:20, well, half of it is love and half of it is yikes. All my life I have chased truth like it was the great beacon on the hill. So on the libation bowl, the curlicue must mean mercy, and the truth is that sign of the cross or reversal. So when Jesus says the truth will set us free, is he talking Sekhmet, the lioness? It's difficult to discern how many of the pits and imperfections on the back of the old bowl are purposeful. It's Ojuelan and far, far older than what you could find in Egypt. But the Egyptians tell us there are 9 parts of the soul going into the afterlife or being tossed into the mouth of truth. It was the penalty for not having lived by the 42 laws of Mott, who, uh, well, you might know 10 of them from the Osarseph, aka Moses redaction, but they came from spell 125b of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and some of them ended up in Exodus 20. The judge with the single striped armband seems to be Osiris or Sirius, which I believe were viewed as basically the same. This time around, they're the balance, along with Libra, between Aquarius and Leo that are about to flip, between the new first of Aries and the new first of Virgo. The pivot when the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn change sides. And notice the mastodon bull of heaven or Seth donkey overlooking the judgment. Mr. Mercy, if you read the more ancient myths. Later on, he got a bad rep. The object to the right simply says our sun is going to go a bit crazy when the first of Aries hits the bottom of the sky in late September. The news headlines are already freaking out about M-class solar storms, and they ain't seen nothing yet. By the way, I did not highlight the bottom of the stone with the pointy nose. That side of the stone was already in color. I asked a friend of mine who sells Mexican artifacts whether the Ojuelans, actually knew Amet, the god of truth, and he said yes. That's the better image of him there in the lower left-hand corner from Mexico. When Virgo lights up and the creatrix finishes the word, adding Hu to Yah, the Lord Creator will have to get busy starting over. I've colored the larger piece. It's the reverse of the red time indicator on the last slide. What I'd like you to notice is that the Empress or Emperor is leaning on Leo while keeping his or her feet at the other side of the sky with the first of Aries. And a bowl of sacrifice is on his or her belly. I'm not sure what goes in that basin. If you choose to celebrate communion, it could be the wine or blood of one of the many names of Dionysos, Tammuz, Dumuzi, the red star. Alternatively, it could be water, since our judge was long associated with water, the giver of life. It's why we do baptisms. Someone the other day was asking about Thoth, the black ibis, who looks suspiciously like a heron sporting opposing stars on his head. Sound familiar? Well, here he is acting as a scribe for the judgment as we enter the belly of the whale. Amit, the god of truth, is busy devouring hearts. Notice where the Ojuelans had the mastodon looking over the shoulder of the empress, the Egyptians turned into an owl. So again, the judge appears to be Orion Osiris, since that would be between the Aquarian owl atop the tree of life and hungry Leo Amit. What's fascinating to me is that the sun in Leo Virgo is expected to pick up the donkey ears of Seth Aquarius, meaning I think that Leo takes over the lands previously associated with Seth, the north, being the lowlands of the Nile Delta. Thoth, the god of wisdom in this case, carries his secret name, Gamut, meaning, I think, that we've run our course. First symbol of Gamut, the G, scholars thought of as some sort of earthen pot. My own interpretation is that it was an axe blade with a triangle at the bottom standing for Aries. M is an owl, perhaps for mom. T is a bread bun, or perhaps the moon standing for dad, Sin. Under the table, I placed another primitive way of writing the letter G or Gimel or Gamma, a verb for getting it on. You can see Orion's beam entering the womb at Virgo for the act of creation, meaning also that Virgo Leo has risen to the top of the sky when we do this thing. Perhaps that's the moment Jesus was talking about, the day a gimel or big rope passes through the needle or vagina or vesica piscis of the Sirius orbit. Also explains a story about Adam objecting to Lilith, always wanting to be on top. If the Baktun were chanting Evi, Evi, they would be celebrating Eagle at the Vav, our time. Take a look at those directions because I believe they may be a hint of what's to come, as opposed to just a mistake by the computer. You see, the world will not be as it was. It will be as if we, of Central America, USA, and Canada had picked up the label South America. Here's an exceedingly ancient story I received from Ireland. For 6 long cycles, the sun did not shine. It did not rise in the east or west, and mankind was afraid. Death stalked man. Man hunted man and ate man. The gods vented their anger. It was the long, cold night of death, and man learned he must change his ways. A light appeared, not in the west as men remembered, but in the east, a faint but bright light. Man shielded his eyes in fear, but when the sun rose in the morning, the people all raised their hands to the sky, giving thanks for their salvation. They made offerings, oaths, and sang. They all agreed that never again shall we walk in the shadow of fear, death, or evil. One day Arcturus is again supposed to rise and fall over us. Sirius will barbecue Mars as bull of heaven thrown down. But then all the world will change. I should think the weather might grow violent, like so much else down here. I always thought that bar on the top was Milky Way returned to the horizon. But what if that is the Northern Hemisphere's new relationship to the horizon? Words fail me. But imagine the proximity of the 2 visitor stars as suddenly flipping the little dynamo inside the planet and magnetically locking its poles with them for the next 3.5 years. And where everything had been a peaceful west to east revolution at 1,000 miles an hour, suddenly the crust and the seas and the atmosphere want to maintain their momentum while the planet orients itself to the visitors instead of Polaris and Polaris Australis. It just seems like that would be a recipe for the biggest earthquakes and volcanoes and storms we've seen in 12,500 years. And here we're getting all upset over which corrupt, addled old man is in charge instead of looking for a better place to live. The teraphim is from Kentucky. There was a time when both the Greeks and the Hebrews kept representations of the heads of their ancestors. Well, so did lots of other folks, in this case, the ancient Cherokee. Here, I believe, for the purposes of illustrating the apocalypse, they divided the sky between the god you can call Adam and the goddess you can call Eve. Forget the story about a ball of clay and the removal of a rib, and assume for the moment that there was always a male and a female principle despite all the arguments of wokeness. Anyway, say this time around they gave him the north and her the south. Matthew 12:42 and Luke 11:31. And as I've probably said before, the earth is due again to turn over, and Dad's side gets severely scalded, namely North America and Northern Europe, or at least that's what the 2025 economic projections imply over at deagle.com. The skies will light up rather ferociously in Leo from the sun and Sirius, for Mars, making Venus suddenly appear as a great star and sacrificing Mars in a blaze of glory. The story of Cupid and Psyche alludes to the fiery romantic connection of Mars and Venus in our time, just as it implies something for Aquarius Seth and Orion Amet in the older story of Tawats the hair god and Tavi the wayward sun god. Anyway, somebody's going to get burned, and I think that somebody will be us in the crossfire. I'm not exactly sure why, but the day the universe lights up and the Birkeland current wakes up Mars and Jupiter and Venus, somehow getting it on with Venus at the other side of the sun is considered illicit. So El Baal, maybe one of the newcomers, was sentenced to the underworld with Mars, probably following his father and grandfather for having committed sodomy on a goddess. Sky goes right, Earth goes left, again and again. The problem will have something to do with sun flares. The ancients thought we would get three, one along that line between Jupiter and Venus, one from the serpent, one from the heron or mastodon, or according to New Mexico's Anasazi, the killer whale. Again, one could be seen as a great heron or mastodon, the other a serpent or rabbit or falcon or phoenix rising. But note which is our cornerstone about to be rejected. Both the red star and the blue star act as the scythe of Saturn as Orion swings his right arm to slay enemies. If the Christ is at the right arm of the Father, about to have his enemies as his footstool, I would think Orion is heading north and Aquarius heading south. And you can call Aquarius Jupiter Zeus and Orion Mars Aries if you prefer. It's still a father and son thing. See, our problem in understanding the apocalypse is that even the Bible writers mix up the metaphors and sexes of the gods. Don't blame Moses. The Egyptians and the Maya did the same thing. I find it exceedingly interesting that we have returned to the oldest pole star on record. Some 12,500 years ago, our ancestors saw fit to warn us we could get into trouble again when the pole returns to Polaris, from which, it was located there, 25,000 years ago. But we're now back to within 3/4 of a degree of that mark. And they had just come through multiple catastrophes of their own, so I'm sure the effort to carve and erect those 18-foot stone pillars cost them dearly. Those 7 to 10 ton pillars at the oldest temple in the world, Göbekli Tepe, are in the shape of a T, the Tav, the cross, the constellation crux that replaces the home of the fallen angel, the heron, Horon, Ursa Minor. They warned of something deadly. Here are two of the Göbekli Tepe altars. One is dedicated to the dragon and the fox or wolf. One is dedicated to the mastodon or heron and the serpent or dragon. Given the propensity of ancient Hebrews, Celts, Aztecs, Phoenicians, Incas, Greeks to sacrifice their children and enemies, I would say that the sacrifice of Aquarius, the man or woman, depending on your mythologies, follows suit with the rest of the zodiacal sacrifices. So the time for bloody bulls and crispy rams and grilled fish has passed. It's nearly time again for Wicker Man. The jaguar priest with the gruesome offering is Toltec from Mexico. Before Leo was a lion, he had been a Maya jaguar, and he too was rendered a crispy critter when the sun, shortly after the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and on the heels of the union of Heron and the serpent, the blue star and the red, getting together near the sun. Note that he took a beam across the belly, just as El Balhadad was gutted like a Mithras bullet Orion sometime around 4400 BC. Some have identified the resulting lion skin of Orion as that fox tail on the pillar, saying a fox must descend from Ursa Major. My suspicion is that they were talking about Nibiru headed our way. If you look at the H's on the pillar, you will see the sorts of pole shifts we're due to endure. They placed the little visitor star that brought comets on the handle of the Big Dipper. You might want to get out your Dionysiaca, look for references to Typhon, but he shows up in numerous ancient histories. I really don't think you can imagine the damage the visitor stars did. Here's a quote from Nonos. The giant turned back and passed from north to south. He left one pole and stood by the other. He dragged the two fishes out of the sky and cast them into the sea. He buffeted the ram. He shadowed the bright radiance of the unclouded sky by darting forth his tangled army of snakes. One of them skipped upon the backbone of the heavenly serpent. Another entwined about the bull's horn's head. Another made a bold leap and jumped around Ophiuchus' arm that held the viper. Dionysiaca, Book 1. The boast is told from Oceanus. I will drown the fiery sun in my quenching flood. I will put out the stars of heaven. I will wash with my waters the ends of the axle and the dry track of the wagon. I will drag down from heaven the fiery Milky Way and bring him back to a new home in the Celtic land. He shall be water again, and the sky shall be bare of the river of fire. The starry fishes that swim on high I will put into the sea and make them mine again. Dionysiaca, Book 23. So here we are. It used to take 10 years for the dragon or chupacabra to eat our lunch. And now we believe it takes 12 years and that he arrived in February 2010. So if you do the math, he's a few months overdue. It traditionally required 7 years for Nibiru Marduk, the bloody junior sun god, to burn half this place with meteors, and he arrived in August 2015. If you believe you've seen forest fires and sun flares, just wait. This thing gets worse. The goddess Inanna, here impersonating Aquarius, warned us we would see 2 turns of the sky between Aquarius and Leo. That it would happen between 2 epicycles of Jupiter. We're going through that second loop in her right hand as we speak. The coin was recently discovered off the coast of Israel. It's a couple of thousand years old. from the year 145 AD, the 8th year of the reign of Antoninus Pius. The coin is rare, one of a series of 13 coins issued with the theme of the zodiac. I find their depictions highly relevant to our present situation, knowing as we do that it is time for us to find a different ecliptic than the one to which we've become accustomed. One visitor, probably the blue star, will reverse our poles. The other will change our ecliptic as it swings by much more closely. Tiwanaku suffered huge changes about half a precession ago. They were in the middle of building the biggest monument to civilization of that era and were either stopped dead in their tracks by the cataclysm or realized they were about to be wiped out and got the hell out of Dodge. But here you can see that they understood reversals. The enemy's head, held by the sun god, was the thief who tried to block the sun. I'm not sure which of the objects of the Nibiru system is pretty broken up, raining asteroids and iron dust, but I'm reasonably sure that was the enemy of the sun to which the carving referred. You know, these movies they're making about a person, tangling with somebody from another planet passing through our solar system. I suspect that would involve visitors from the planet Arda, the one whose astronauts violated the rules of non-interference down here, helping us quickly reestablish civilization. Maximilien de Lafayette thought the visitors would be back next month. I hope the delegations from the Vatican and the United Nations are standing ready at the Stargate. As I recall, there is a small UN force on Mount Hermon in case they show up at the ancient teleporter pad. There are stories of pharaohs wanting to see Horus, then called Or or Horon. Well, if anyone had claimed to meet him, I suspect this is where they had gone. Hor Ab, the real Mount Sinai in the land of Midian in northwest Arabia. Can you see Horon? And that's what's he about to do? Visit the land? Eat the sacrifice? To me, it vaguely looks like Hebrew letters for Yahweh, the Lamb of God, but perhaps I'm just seeing things. For a better idea, you would have to look at the ancient alphabets, Jazz, Phoenician, Proto-Sinaitic, to see what they were up to, but it looks like some sort of script for teaching the gathered masses back when Moses was splitting the rock for water and Aaron was trying to illustrate a golden calf or ram as El, Exodus 19 to 32. The object at the top is a pipe. It tells us that the dragon is a serpent whose face is a lamb, who comes at the end of the fifth Ahau, hence the 5 rattles. His warning will come from Venus, but your real problems will arrive from Mars and Jupiter. A smoking hole is there in the middle at the Milky Way. Mars gets it when his daddy gets slammed with the beam and tosses his thunderbolts. Whichever survives, a lamb's going to cry. My suspicion is that Venus-Jupiter will be the axis of a Birkeland current between the red star and the blue in a time that Sirius and Orion have energized the entire solar system with some sort of expected outburst of plasma between galactic center and anticenter. Did you notice that the Vav could be understood as the simultaneous arrival of the heron and the dragon? They're pretty much the same thing, a 2-star system that blew in from the northeast. Now it's so close it's going to eat our lunch from both ends of the sky. My guess is that Saturn was associated with dad and flood, while Jupiter was associated with mom and fire. When you see their associated planets, called the Sabiti, you'll have 20 different stories to explain this thing to your still hungry children's children's children. It's not really that God is truly vindictive, it's that the resulting devastation of our time lasts a while. I spoke to one of my born again friends yesterday to see what she thought of truth and mercy. Is truth, to the Egyptians and Ojuelans, Amit, any more serious an opponent than mercy, Seth has said? Because we're in a time when we will be in both Leo and Aquarius as the world turns round in the knot of Tiet. And you can look at it as 2 years of hell or as 100 days of the worst. Anyway, her answer was God doesn't do truth without mercy. They go together like peas in a pod. So where it says in Psalm 85, mercy and truth are met together, righteousness and peace have kissed each other. I'm thinking righteousness was Jupiter, Lamb of God, now at the first of Aries, and peace was Saturn, the owner of Aquarius, until he hands it to his son and heads home. Mercury, Venus, and Mars are each due up for a promotion. Well, forgive me if you can, taking terrible liberties with your scriptures and inherited traditions. I'm just trying to figure out before it happens. My feeling is that we're so very close to endgame now. Some of your friends will desperately want to place their faith in November to any megalomaniac who promises to make things better. My experience of about 7 decades is that trust in someone obviously on a greedy power trip who claims to be on a mission is generally misplaced. But my friend reassures me, whoever the appointed is, they're not going to know it until it hits him. Wow. I hope there's a good litmus test for the prophets 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy 18. Because have you ever looked up the definition of a demon? In our present society gone crazy, how could you tell an antichrist counterfeit from the true avatar of God? And would you recognize them on the street? Shema bless you and keep you, now and forever. Take care.